All right, thank you for being here, audience. And Esther, it's lovely to see you again at the Jaipur Literature Festival. I am not going to waste any time with introductions because I think all of you need no introduction to Esther and her work. We're here. Here's the book. I don't know how many of you have read Poor Economics by Abhijit, Banerjee and Esther Duflo, but there is a new edition out and there's quite a bit of new material in here. So we're going to cover that a little bit. And without any further ado, I'm going to launch into the session because we have 20 minutes and then I'm going to give lots of time for audience questions. Okay, Esther, thank you for being here. So I want to start with the book itself. In the first edition in 2011, in the opening chapter called Think Again Again, you have written about 1 billion hungry people and about the debate between aid optimists and aid pessimists. And you say essentially that both camps are asking the wrong question. So when you and Abhijit sat down to write this book, did you imagine that it would find the audience that it did? Were you writing for academics, or did you think that this book would find such a large audience?
Thank you everyone. A huge pleasure to be here at DLF, and especially with Meru, who should add us to the list of people she has worked with since she was the editor of this book when it came up in India. Actually, the book was a huge surprise to us in the resonance of the book. Obviously, we were not writing for academic. Our idea was precisely that academics love to speak to each other in languages that not very many other people can follow or have an interest to follow. And if we want economics to influence the world, then we need to be able to speak to the world. And these are policymakers, these are people, these are just regular citizens, and so on. So that's what we try to do with Poor Economics, but obviously neither of us had done it in quite this way before. So the resonance that it found has been a huge success and very gratifying. And that's why actually I went on to write for kids after that, because I was like, oh, since I can write for adults, maybe I can try for kids too. I've done Poor Economics for kids. But this has been a transformational impact on our lives. I don't know about the world, I hope so, but.
Well, of course, you have had that kind of impact. As you said, you're one of the rare people in academia who is willing to write for a larger audience. And as you said, that's how you make impact. And you clearly did make an impact, because here we are 10 years later, more than 10 years later, with a new edition. So can you tell the audience a little bit about how your thinking has changed since the original edition came out? What changed? What surprised you? What do you think you were right about? And what do you think you were just plain wrong about?
Yeah, so it's almost 15 years since the first edition of Poor Economics, and we thought it would be a good time to look back and think precisely where we got it right, where we got it wrong, what we missed entirely. Obviously, when you write a paper, you're really trying to be very exact about what you know and what you don't know, and leave what you don't know aside. But when you write a book, you have to weave a lot of the papers and a lot of the stories together, and you have to make some bets. And so we knew that some part of the narrative that is woven around the chapters would maybe prove to be wrong down the line. So we thought it would be important to have this look back. And we try to be quite genuine in the book. In the first chapter of the book, which is a kind of a look back at all of the chapters, we try to be genuine into identifying what we did get right, what we did get wrong. I'll give you just one example of each. On what we did get right, I think we understood the education issue pretty well. And maybe we have a chance to get back to it, but identifying the central issue of education as one where a school system is kind of ramming through a curriculum without much interest in who is actually listening to the curriculum, is a problem that is a problem in the world, not just in India, but also in India. And then that there are solutions to get at these problems is also something where a lot of progress was made since then. So this is something we got right. Something we got partially wrong is our view about microcredit. So when we were starting to write, when we were writing Poor Economics, there were a few studies on microcredit which showed no impact, positive or negative, on anybody. And that's kind of how we left it. It's sort of disappointing. It's not bad, but it's not that good. It's used by most people to buy a fridge or a cycle. So think of it more as a credit card than as a business product. What we've since then learned, because we went back to people who were part of these experiments a long time ago, is that there are actually a few people, not everyone, which was the initial presumption of microcredit, but a small subset of the borrower who are extremely enthusiastic entrepreneurs, who are constrained and like money. And those people, when they got money 10 years ago, they are vastly richer now. So it's kind of a modulation over what we were saying in poor economics, which is basically in poor economics, the product is just not adapted as a business product. And now we're realizing even that product actually can be quite useful for a small number of people to achieve vast growth, which I think is an important change of perspective, because it really should be a call to action to various agencies in the financing space, which is how do we find these people and give them what they need. It's not a mass product, but it's potentially transformational for some clients. So these are just two examples, and then the chapters are full of such stories.
You raised this point about education, which you were absolutely so right about. So I'm going to stick with that for a minute, because it's so important in terms of what's happening right now. You have talked about the S curve of education, and you wrote that poor parents see education as an all or nothing bet. And because the returns seem so low for basic schooling, and that the big payoff only comes if a child makes it all the way to college. So parents will either push one child hard, or they'll just treat it like a lottery system and they don't invest in the child at all. Now, is that what you're still seeing?
So this is very much the perception of the parents, and it actually maybe matches financial returns. But what it forgets is that there are all sorts of benefits of basic education that are way beyond the financial benefits. So we did a study in Ghana with a few co-authors where we gave kids a scholarship for secondary school, because in Ghana, school is free until grade 8, and then it's very expensive from 9 to 12. So most kids, even kids who qualify and get into the system, pass their exam. It's quite competitive, but even the kids who pass their exam, many of them don't go because they can't afford it. So we were able to identify a few kids in 2008 and give them fellowships to attend secondary school, and we've been following these kids ever since. So those kids are now adults. They have children of their own. And what we found is that the kids of the kids who went to secondary school, especially the kids of the girls, number one, infant mortality has been divided by 2. That alone makes the entire investment in secondary school worth it, and much more than it. Thank you so much. This is something that I found also super exciting, because I've kind of always heard that, and honestly, there was no evidence that it was true. So sometimes it's nice to find that something is true that you believed was true. So this was very much the case. Number 2, the kids of these kids who are now 6, 7, 8-year-old, their cognitive scores are much higher. And therefore, those are kids who themselves will do better in the school system. These types of benefits of education, they are not, and then at the same time, we found that especially boys who got the secondary school scholarship, most of them don't earn more money because there is no job for them to monetize that extra secondary education, because in some sense that's not enough to really kind of make a difference, because again, they can't afford college. So it's very important to think of education in this way as an investment in the ground capacity of people. And this is not something that parents necessarily do, but that also means that we have to think about what we are teaching the kids, because what you want education to be is an enabler for the children to be able to decode life in general, including the packets of oral rehydration solution, as well as, how do you play with an AI agent. Either of that is given by the education mindset as opposed to the curriculum.
No, that's so interesting that you should say that. And I'll ask you one last question about education before moving on to a story about Rajasthan, since we are in Rajasthan. Of course, these questions are true when parents do see an investment like education pay off for the whole family. So if one member of the family does well, the whole family benefits. Sorry, there's someone on the mic here. No, we can hear you on the mic. Sorry. Coming back to this, what advice, how many of you are either in university or have children going to university? Because this question will directly affect you. Okay, quite a few, I think. So what advice would you give as an economist, given that education, because of AI, is undergoing one of the biggest transformations, not just in terms of the delivery of education, but in terms of the return on investment that people, whether you are rich or poor, will be able to see on that investment. Education has always been a means to getting out of poverty. Do you believe that will continue to be the case once you have the kind of AI transformation that society is currently looking at?
So college education is a very interesting place to think about right now. It turns out I'm on a small task force at MIT that is trying to rethink the undergraduate program. So this is a question that I actually live and breathe. What do we have to teach MIT students who are, at the top of the food chain and have a very strong technical background, but have been, majoring in very large number in computer science? Are their skills going to be needed in some way, shape, or form? So if I knew the answer to this question, I think I would be substantially wealthier than I am now.
Maybe with a second Nobel Prize.
But I'll tell you what my guesses are, and that we are kind of operationalizing to some extent in this thinking. One is that this is basically an extension of what I was saying about primary education, that you have to think about college education not as a vocational program where you are learning a few skills that you can then deliver to your employer. We have to think about college education as a way to equip students to conduct themselves in the world. So think of it more as a GPS than as a phone book, if that makes sense. I don't know if that, I just made up that analogy on the fly, and I'm not sure it was a great idea. But think of it as this GPS, which is what they need is to be ready to learn, because the entire landscape is evolving so fast that the specific skill you are teaching anybody will become obsolete by the time they finish their education, and certainly by the time they're in the job market. So what this implies, in my opinion, and that's somewhat self-serving perhaps, but is that college education needs to involve a strong humanity background, the ability to write, the ability to think, the ability to make decisions for yourself. And that involves philosophies, that involve ethics, that involve social science. And that's true including for our engineers. And it also means that, rather than learning to write lines of codes, you need to learn fundamental probability and statistics, because this is what is under the hood of these things that are going to help you moving forward. So in some sense, at some level, this moving forward of the technology, to me, means that we need to move backwards, or we need to move higher up in terms of the fundamental of what's in education, including learning to brush your teeth and make your bed and so on, that most college students, I think it's true in India and it's definitely true in the US, haven't learned when they were in high school. They were too busy taking tests. But this might prove wildly wrong. I think that the world is moving so fast that it's even harder to predict things than it used to be even a few years ago.
And because we're short on time, I want to actually come back to the new edition of the book. And you've added substantial material in 2 new chapters. And you have written on 2 themes which were not in the original book, which is societal protection, cash transfers, safety nets, and of course climate change. Can you just tell the audience a little bit about the new chapters and what you've added to the book?
Right, so the first new chapter we already discussed is a look back at what was in the book. The last chapter is what we missed altogether. And one is social protection and one is climate change. Social protection, I don't feel bad missing because it's just radically different now than it was before. And in particular, when we wrote Poor Economics, the first edition, the idea of cash transfers were simply absent. And now, especially after COVID, it's really become one tool in the toolkit of the policymakers worldwide, including countries, for example, in Africa that never had them. And in many, many, many states in India where they've become an important part of the toolkit, which raises a bunch of questions about how people use the money, how you target, and so on. So we wanted to kind of landscape the evidence. I'll give you one headline result to not bore people, which is poor people make extremely good use of the cash, and therefore cash transfer is actually a pretty effective, low overhead way to reach people in a way that's not wasted. It doesn't mean it's a silver bullet and that's all you have to do, because cash transfer are not educating anybody and they are not vaccinating children. So there might be interventions that are higher social return than cash transfer, but those interventions might be complement to a basis where you have a basis of social protection where nobody has to starve at any given point. The second chapter, which I feel a little bit bad or guilty about omitting in the first version, is environment and climate. Looking back, it seems crazy that we wrote a whole book on poverty and we didn't have anything on the environment. But we try to start by talking about a few points, and the most important point from the point of view of poor economics is that climate change is already here. It's not in the future. It's here now, and it will be in the future as well. Number two, it's already profoundly affecting the lives of poor people worldwide. A, because they live in places that are already hot, and B, because they are not able to protect themselves as well. They don't have air conditioning, they have a profession that has to be done outside, and so on and so forth. And therefore, there is no way to think about how to cope with climate change that doesn't put the poor at the very center of the conversation, which is not the case now.
And are you going to be writing more about this in the future?
Yeah, maybe, hopefully next year
I don't want to push my luck too far, but yeah.
Maybe next year we come back with, we have actually writing a new book on precisely this question.
You heard it here first.
I heard it here first. So that's stay tuned for a new book precisely on these questions, but some little feelers are in this chapter on climate change in Poor Economics, new edition.
And also just talking about cash transfer, because this is a question I've been waiting to ask Esther, is we always think about cash transfers as a way to help the poor. But with AI, just like 10 years ago, people saw climate change as a problem of the future, maybe we are in a similar place with AI right now, that we're very early in that conversation, and maybe in 10 years, everybody will all turn around and say, how did we not see that coming? I want to talk to you and ask you to tell us about UBI and how would it potentially be different from a cash transfer if we reach a situation where, because of AI, you see middle class unemployment. And how do you think behaviorally it would be different? How in practice, through politics, government, would it be different if you saw a kind of cash transfer through UBI to the middle class because of AI displacement? Do you see this as a possibility, and what could be the impact of this?
So I think the COVID experience was very illuminating in this regard. During COVID, in many countries, but particularly in rich countries, everybody suddenly, almost everybody found themselves recipients of cash transfer in some way, shape, or form. In France, for example, the governments paid firms to keep people employed even though they didn't have a job for them. In the US, people went unemployed, but they got very high unemployment benefit, usually much higher than what their wages would have been. And nobody found this shocking. It was like, oh, there is this big shock outside. Yes, of course, we need some insurance. So the idea of, actually my hope at that time is that, people will realize that social insurance is just that, insurance. It's not because you're lazy that you currently don't have a job. It's because something happened to you. So they will become more tolerant of social transfers for the poor in the future. That didn't happen. But what I think happened is that it did prepare people from the idea that everybody at some moment in time, even people who are extremely well educated, who are coming from privileged background and so on, might find a rough patch and might need some help to get out of it. I don't exactly know how this will play up with AI to the extent that these are permanent loss in income. But what we discuss in the new book is how this play out with climate, which is for the poorest country, we are proposing actually a UBI. We'll get them out of the poverty line. But for a country like India, what we are proposing is the idea that there should be weather-triggered basic income, which is when there is a heat wave, people immediately get a transfer, and that would be everyone. But that would be in response to events. So maybe people would have to not really apply, but register for it. Maybe people who are rich enough will not feel that it's worth registering, but I think many people will. And then it kind of would normalize the idea that one of the roles of society is to provide insurance for this type of events. And you could totally imagine the reactions to AI being part of it, where losing your job because you've been replaced by an AI agent would form one of those events till you can, put back on your feet and find something else.
Thank you, Esther. And one final question before we open it up to the audience. There's a lovely story in the book which I wanted to share with the audience because it's set in Rajasthan, and that was about an immunization program which Jaipur did. Can you tell the audience, because it's a lovely story, can you just tell the audience about it before we open it up?
Yeah, with pleasure. This was one of my first projects actually done in collaboration with a wonderful organization working out of Udaipur for years and years with Gandhian ideals, Seva Mandir, on immunization. And they were interested in kind of improving immunization rates in tribal area around Jaipur, where they were extraordinarily low, where less than 5% of kids were getting all of the immunization in the standard immunization package. So what we did, number one, is to work in collaboration with Seondia and the government to get very good services delivered. And that was fine, that was the first step. That increased the immunization rate from 5% to 17%. And what we did on top of that, in half of those villages, is to offer a kilo of dal plus a set of plates at the end, a kilo of dal per immunization, plus a set of plates for people who have completed the cycle. And that increased the immunization rate from this 17% to 37%, full immunization rate, where almost everyone got at least 4 shots and 37% get the full thing. So this was really very powerful. This is kind of one of my very favorite projects. The second one being the Ghana project that I described to you in a few minutes ago. And since then, we were able to expand it in other places, scale it up in different countries. And in Haryana, in the state of Haryana, we did a large-scale version of the program where DAL was replaced by cell phone minutes. And on top of that, we included another component, which was social mobilization through influential people in the network. So what we did is we went to each village and asked, hey, who is a mover and shaker in your community? Turns out everybody knows, who
that person is.
Who can be given a news and spread it. And then we went to them and we offered to enroll them in a program where we would kind of remind them to remind their friends that this program is there and immunization is important. And they did that. And we had a huge success of this program and on its own, actually. And in the poorest district, in combination with incentive, leading to really large gain in immunization rates, times 3. Immunization rates went up, were multiplied by 3 in the poorest low immunization district. So this is something that grew out of Udaipur. You can now find in Pakistan, you can find in several countries in Africa, and also in the state of Haryana is supported very broadly with a lot of, and that's exciting because there is nothing better than immunizing a kid.
Thank you so much, Esther. And we're going to end the session on this wonderful positive note and then open it up to your questions. We're going to be taking 3 questions at a time. And just before we start, no thoughts, comments, stream of consciousness. Can we just have very specific questions? And we'll keep it brief. Let's have 1, 2, and 3. These 3 ladies in the front, can we, because we're just short of time, can you all 3 give your questions? And then we'll answer these 3, and if we have time, we'll move on. Who has the mic? Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think it's working now. Thank you very much, Esther. I just wondered if you could drill down into the climate change point a little bit. I gather it's the subject of your new book. India, for example, is urbanizing incredibly fast, as is the world, and particularly the southern hemisphere. Much of that growth is informal, slums, and I think over 1 billion people now live in slums worldwide. Do you have any thoughts on how urbanization should go forward, given climate change? Have you worked on that at all?
There was a lady here. Yes.
The mic, please. Hi, Esther. I just wanted to ask you this, that you're talking about education. In the South was the first, which introduced the midday meals for little children so that they could come to school and not drop out. Now, what was seen was that they all finished school because they had lovely food to eat and they didn't have to go out and work as they were compelled by their parents. But then some of them went to college and some of them dropped out. And now in the new dispensation that we have, it's been called freebies, whereas it was introduced as welfare. I want your views on it. Do you view it as welfare, which I do, or as freebies, doles to little children, attracting them to come to school? Thank you.
And the lady over here. Lady over here. And then, Esther, you can take these 3 questions. If we have time, we'll continue.
Hi. On your topic for AI, where you mentioned that it could be a cause of unemployment, momentarily maybe, but Elon Musk has put out strong statements that, and he's contradicting your statement, and rather says, Grok, Optimus, Starlink, these could in fact alleviate poverty completely and rather increase the universal base income sooner. In fact, we have Starlink all across Iran today where there's an outage of internet. And it's also in Africa, in certain countries that you mentioned too, that is increasing education and rather making it free. And with robotics and AI, labor could virtually become cheaper or free. So I contradict your statement, and I would like you, I know your book is not coming up on AI currently. Your focus is climate change. So I would like you to, what are your thoughts on Elon Musk's statements?
Thank you.
So I'll take this this 3 as briefly as possible. So on Elon Musk, I guess neither he nor me have a crystal ball. I hope he's right. But we need to leave open the possibility that not. And then I would be delighted if he funded UBI for the world. He definitely has enough money to do that. On the midday meal, I think the midday meal, there have been several evaluations of midday meal programs showing the success it had in bringing kids to school. For primary school, the topic really is not anymore to have kids in school, partly because of the midday meal success, but to make sure that they are learning something. And that's kind of what it was a little bit the objective of the topic of our chapter. It's funny because in the US you say welfare and people, look the wrong way. It's funny that you see it positive. I think the midday meal is a wonderful program. Kids need to eat anyways, so and they need to be nourished in order to listen what's happening in school. And it did have a role in bringing them to school. On urbanization and climate, I think this kind of cities need to be ready to accommodate people. People will continue to come. Especially as part of some areas with climate change will simply become not cultivable anymore. Once you don't have water in the ground, there's nothing you can do. People will move to cities, and cities need to be ready to accommodate them. This is a massive public infrastructure, public development project, which it's going to be impossible to short circuit. Otherwise, it's even hotter now. There is a study where Harvard studies where they put Fitbits on people to know what temperature they experience in their daily activity, as well as measurement in temperature in their home. And the home in these slums are incredibly hot, and they remain hot even during the night and even once the weather has cooled. So this is actually a very immediate public health issue.
Thank you, Esther. Let's take some from the back of the audience this time. There's the gentleman over there. Behind. Yes. Yes, you. Yeah. That's one. Yeah, please go ahead.
Make it quick. Fascinating discussion. Thanks so much. Esther, you spoke about insurance and sort of reinvigorating it, perhaps parametric insurance, faster, more disaster-driven than based on other logistics. And I'm wondering what other tenets of economics you're reconsidering, rethinking, or unlearning because AI, because climate change, and a whole host of other disruptions. Thank you.
Thank you. On this side, anybody? There's this gentleman over here. Where's the person with the mic? Okay, you're all the way at the back, so give it to that gentleman over there. The lady over there. Yeah. I think we only have time for two, so that's going to be the last question, I'm afraid. Go ahead, please, and can you make it quick?
Hi. Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious about finding like hyper-local interventions. How do we balance finding education interventions that can be scaled across India and also finding hyper-local interventions that are effective in their communities but maybe not scalable, especially in literacy where there are so many languages? How do we find those and scale the parts of those interventions that we can scale and also highlight the qualitative things that we can't scale?
Thank you. Go ahead, Esther.
So I guess my line of trade is scale. It's very difficult to do public policy without thinking about what can you do that you can do relatively broad-based, which doesn't mean that then you don't create the condition for people to complement that in their own communities. But I think it has been actually, when we were writing Poor Economics the first time, this was really like a bit of a trope in the aid sector that everything has to be super local and therefore there cannot be any lessons that can generalize. And my experience, our experience with Jaipur is that there are plenty of things that generalize extremely well. And those are the ones we need to find, and working with large organizations, civil society organizations, as well as governments to get scale. On the issue of unlearning, I like the way you phrase it. I think I don't have much to unlearn because I've always kept a very kind of open-minded attitude and an idea that I really don't know very much. So one of my favorite phrases that my team makes fun for me is when they ask me a question like, how would I know? I don't know. And I think it's a good, going back, I was saying, we need to send the students back to the basic. I think a good back to the basic one is Socrates, know what you don't know. And then that keeps you open-minded to discover new things and to be ready for adapting to changing circumstances. And then AI and climate are two of them. So and that's kind of what we are trying to model also in this new edition of Poor Economics, is to be kind of pretty open about what has changed compared to what we were describing at the time.
Thank you, Esther. I have been told by the organizers that we have time for one last question. So whoever wants it, please make it count. Who has the most burning question out there? This lady over there. She looks like she has a burning question. Yeah.
In the Indian context, what advice would you give the Indian government for policy development for poverty alleviation?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, thank you very much. We love this question. So, in fact, Jaipur has a big presence in India. We have an office out of IFMR and in many states in India where we are exactly in the business of providing such advice. There's not a one answer to these questions because there is not one silver bullet against poverty, but there are many silver pellets. But I'll give you one example of a collaboration that we are engaged with, which is with the scaling up of anti-poverty intervention for people who are extremely poor. So this is called the graduation program and was launched by BRAC now about 20 years ago, was evaluated in several countries, including India, for 17 years, and has shown very durable, very large impact. Now, on the basis of these promising results, the intervention was scaled up in several Indian states, including Bihar first. We have been involved in the evaluation of this program with Bihar, and then the MORD decided to scale up the program for the whole, first of all, for 11 states, putting a considerable amount of financial resources behind the program. So I give you this example just as one answer to your question, which is invest in graduation program. They are proven, they are effective, they work beautifully. Another example would be teaching at the right level, the Pratham program that also became policy in many states in India. But Meta is, and this is something that we're finding more and more and more around many states and the central government in India, is be open to the evidence. That others have generated, and also to the capacity that you can have even within government in generating evidence for kind of concentrating resources on the things that really work. And this is something that we kind of try and launch with Poor Economics. I think Poor Economics did play a role in making that easier because everybody has read it in the government sector and in the NGO sector, and that's very nice. But this is, so my hope is that this sort of continue and expands in a way that, you know, kind of develop and puts in action many more effective policy solutions across different sectors, both in India and then, you know, showing examples to the world.
Thank you so much, Esther, and thank you for that wonderful last question. Let's give a huge round of applause to Esther Duflo, and please buy a copy of their new updated book, which has, as you said, it has a macro in it. So
The red one.
the red one, the one with the red egg on it, that's the one you need to buy. Thank you, Esther. Thank you to the audience.
Thank you.